Again, thank you so much for being here this morning and being a part of our Sunday morning series that we've been on each week for the last year. We have been studying what the Bible tells us about specific areas of interest and concern and daily life that we are facing in the world in which we live. Our hope and our desire is to come to a clear biblical understanding of very important topics and issues. We decided we weren't going to talk about politics, but we were going to talk about human government and its role and its responsibility. We discovered back in the book of Genesis that God was the one who actually instituted the responsibility of mankind to be accountable to mankind for their behavior. And it was kind of the beginning steps of forming a governing body in which people would hold other people accountable. In Genesis chapter 9, it was for the subject of murder and mankind and society, holding mankind and society responsible for that particular issue, which was the sanctity of life. Mankind had demonstrated throughout biblical history that left alone, they were incapable of having their own form of human government, because we would choose to do our own thing, our own way, and not want anyone to tell us otherwise. And we see that in the book of the Judges, which is a dark period in Israel's history. 4 times in the book of Judges, the author says there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. There was this desire, though they had been given the law, they had been given information from God as to how to live together in a community, in a society. They chose rather independence and a selfish independence that was really only what they wanted, how they wanted, and no one had the right to tell them otherwise. Well, that created anarchy in the nation, and we see that happens every time it's tried in the world in which we live, when we just want to do our own thing, our own way, and no one's going to tell us different. And I don't care whether that's in a first grade classroom, it's in the streets of the United States, whether it's in no matter what the circumstances, when everyone just decides they're going to do what they want, their way, how they want it done, anarchy erupts. It happened in the nation of Israel time after time after time, until finally they were finished with it and they said, "We want a king." Well, God said, I'm going to give you full disclosure, because if you choose a king, there is going to be ramifications involved. And he lays out very specifically what the ramifications of a king will bring to the nation. And the nation chooses the king, even though they had been warned, this will not go as you think it will go. This will not be somebody, because remember, they wanted someone to fight their battles, win their wars, take care of them. And he says, you're going to get that, but he is going to dominate you. He is going to tax you. He's going to use your children as instruments of his own purposes and plans. He is going to organize a government taxation system that will be for his benefit, and you will be his slaves. We don't care. We want someone to protect us. We want safety. We want security and someone to fight our battles. Give us a king. Well, the nation of Israel never recovered from that. They went from generation to generation until even when the Romans had their boot on the neck of the Jews and the whole world by this time, Israel got what they were asking for, which was a tyrant king, generation after generation after generation. Well, the Lord Jesus appears into that life when Rome has its boot on the nation of Israel's neck, along with most of the world at that time. And so when we come to the New Testament, we start to unfold, how did Jesus respond when the political system was as it was? And so this morning, what we've done is we've looked at government and we've tried to define how God developed it. We looked at the law and liberty that people chose over the law. They'll choose independent liberty to do as they please over a legal system every time when left on their own. And really, I think they wanted a king because the king somewhat brought some teeth to that legal system. We needed somebody to enforce it. And we're going to see that that is really as God intended to happen when we look at the book of Luke and we begin to read the New Testament. For this morning, we're going to look at authority, power, and governing. We looked at law, liberty, and a king. This morning, we're going to look at authority, power, and government. And it really is going to speak to the role of government, because God has a role for human government. It's going to be stated here in Luke chapter 20, and what we're going to discover in Jesus' discussion in Luke 20, and then a little bit later, probably next week in John 19, Jesus will give us some very, very small bits of information that Paul and Peter elsewhere in the New Testament will develop. They'll broaden. What Jesus says in a sentence, they will take a chapter to unfold, and we won't stop until we get it unfolded by Paul and by Peter. Luke chapter 20, we're going to discover that the role of government is wrapped up into three important words. There are three important words because now Paul and Peter, moving forward, will use these exact three words every time they speak about human government. Every time Paul will address human government, he will use one of these three words. Every time Peter will write on human government, he will address one of these three words. And the next time we see Jesus, in the scriptures, in the book of John chapter 19, which probably won't be till next week or the following week, Jesus uses one of these words when he is face to face with a Roman governor of his time. If you have a Bible, I would invite you to Luke, a wonderful gospel recorded for us by Paul's personal doctor and the doctor that accompanied Paul on his missionary journeys, writes the book of Luke and gives us a glimpse into the life of the Lord Jesus. We're going to be in Luke, and then I'm going to ask you to put your outline in Luke. In just a minute, we're going to go to Matthew. So we're going to read Luke now, and then we're going to leave it, but we're going to come back. So when we get ready to leave it and go to Matthew, put something here, because I'll want you to come back to Luke chapter 20 if time permits us. Are you there in Luke chapter 20? Look with me starting with verse 19. The scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on Jesus at that very hour, for they perceived that he had told this parable against them. Previously, you'll read earlier in the book of, earlier in this very chapter, Jesus tells a parable. And it's really clear who he's pointing out. And it is, exactly as they suspect, being pointed out against them. And they are sick and tired of him making them look so bad. His parables point to their hypocrisy. His parables point to their irreverence to really the things of the Lord and making up their own ideas of righteousness, their own ideas of holiness. And they have had enough, and they have been trying time after time to trip Jesus up in his words, whether they were over moral issues, religious issues, or government issues. They keep coming at him with these three things, and they think they have finally got a question that they can ask him that will stump him or expose him in such a way that they can use his words against him to bring about his arrest. So, in verse 20, they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something he said, so as to deliver him. And here's our three words. And these three words are going to show up time and time again throughout our New Testament. They wanted to deliver him up to the authority. That word will be used about human government through the New Testament. Jurisdiction, and some of your translations may be a little different, but in the ESV, the second word is jurisdiction. And then thirdly, to the governor, or those who are in a governing kind of position. Those three words are going to show up, and they're important words for us. So before we go much farther, let's define these three words. The first that is translated here is authority. It literally means the beginning, as if it would be like the beginning chain of a link of chains, the beginning stitch in a lengthy woven pattern is how this word was used. And it had to do with something that was the very first, because it had authority for all that was going to happen behind it. It was as if the word authority is like the buck starts here. That's somebody who has authority. The buck starts with this person. And so God intended that human government holds a ruling position in human affairs. This word authority mainly has to do with a position, somebody in a rightful position. The second word that's used here is translated jurisdiction, has the idea of having a right or at liberty to act independently. It has the idea of a position of power. God intended human government to not only hold a position, but a position of power. The third word is the word governor, the procurator, one administering in the name of and with the authority of someone above him. Someone who governs is in a position to have power and authority because someone has given it to them. In this case, they're wanting to take Jesus to Pilate. Pilate has been given this position because he is under direct authority all the way back to Caesar himself. And so because he has that authority and that power, he can act independently. He can do as he wishes in certain areas within his scope of responsibility. And God intended that human government take action. The word governor has the idea of someone who can make a decision, someone who can take action. Because you can have authority but not ability to take any action. You can have responsibility but not. You need to, for what God intended and what these words will be used throughout the rest of the New Testament. God intended for human government to not only have a position, but to have the power to implement that position and the right to act based upon it. The book of John, chapter 19, Jesus will use one of these words when he actually does get a chance to speak face to face with Pontius Pilate. Paul will use it in Romans 13. He'll use it again in Titus chapter 3, and Peter will use it in his first book in the second chapter, and we'll get to those in the next couple of weeks. In Luke chapter 20, the Jewish leaders are acknowledging that Rome's authority, that Rome has authority. They're acknowledging that Rome has power and that Rome can make a decision. The question that they're going to ask is, do we legally have to obey it? Are you still there? We haven't turned to Matthew yet. Let's keep reading here in Luke chapter 20. So they want to take Jesus to the authority who has jurisdiction and the ability to act if they can simply trap him in what he says and accuse him and then bring him to these individuals. So verse 21, they ask him, "Teacher, we know," and this is just like buttering him up, and I'm sure he sees through this and he just can't. Have you ever had somebody like butter you up in the anticipation that they're going to just tear you down? Well, that's what they do. "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God." If they believed that, they would have been his followers. They weren't. They were his adversaries. And so now here's the question. Is it lawful? And when they say lawful, they're talking about the Mosaic law. Because, you see, they were under two different laws. They were under the Mosaic law that they were under it, and there's a lot of, we can go into just what they were doing being under that Mosaic law, but they were under the Mosaic law, and they were also under the laws of the nation, of the Roman Empire. And so the question is it mosaically lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not? The question is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar? Is it something legally binding on us, not from Roman law, but from Jewish law, Mosaic law? That's their question. So what we really then get into is, how far does government have the opportunity to reach? We understand the role of government, but what is the reach of government? How far can government go? Should we pay taxes to Caesar? And this is where we're going to leave Luke, because what we find recorded for us in Matthew is the question, not is it legal mosaically to pay, but Jesus, do you pay taxes? So mark Luke with me just for a minute, and let's look at the book of Matthew, chapter 17. I hope we're going to get back to Luke. But I think that it's important to see this in connection with what's happening in the book of Luke. These are not the same occasion, but they have some similarity in what's happening and what Jesus is teaching and doing and being recorded for us in both of these texts. When we get to Matthew chapter 17, starting in verse 24, they have been walking and ministering around the Sea of Galilee, and now he and his disciples find themselves up in Capernaum. Capernaum is the northernmost part of the Sea of Galilee. And collectors of the 2 denarii tax went up to Peter and said, so there was a tax that needed to be collected. There's debate on whether this was a Jewish tax for the for the temple, or whether this was a Roman tax. I'll tell you why I think it's one over the other. But 2 individuals come to Peter. Peter must have been being acknowledged as the leader of Jesus' disciples at this time, or they would have come to somebody else. These tax collectors come to Peter, and they say, look, does your teacher pay taxes? This was not an income tax. They didn't get off their fishing boats and have to pay a tax for the haul that they had just pulled out of the sea. This is an existence tax. You just had to pay a tax because you were. It didn't have anything to do with anything else. Just if this is a Roman tax, the Romans collected from their Roman Empire this tax. It was an existence tax. Romans didn't have to pay it. Romans didn't pay certain taxes if you were living in Rome and were a citizen of Rome. They taxed everybody else. If it was a Jewish temple tax, this would have been a tax that you would have paid to help with the maintenance and the upkeep of the temple complex. So the question comes to him is, does Jesus pay the tax? Well, he said, yes, Peter says to them. And then when he came to the house, Jesus spoke to him first. So Jesus, knowing what Peter had just encountered with these tax collectors, asks Peter a question. Peter, what do you think? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? That's why I think this is a Roman tax, because he's talking about kings who collect tax. When they collect this tax, do they collect it from their own sons, or do they collect it from everybody else? In Rome, as a Roman, you didn't have to pay this tax. They taxed everybody else, and that money went back to Rome. And so Jesus is asking Peter this question: from whom do the kings of the earth collect tax? From their own sons or from others? That's why I personally, again, think this isn't a temple tax. I think this is a Roman tax, because he's talking about a king. Because I think if it was a temple tax, he would have said, so where do the priests collect their taxes? Do the priests collect them from their sons, or do they collect them from everybody else? Do they let their sons slide by? He would have probably fashioned his question that way. He doesn't. He says, how do the kings of this earth tax their people? Do they tax their own children, or do they levy that tax on everybody else? Jesus said to him, then the sons are free, aren't they? So if you're a king and you're going to tax everybody, you don't collect from your own sons. Your own sons are tax exempt. However, verse 27, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself. So the question, and there's a lot about this fish, and I mean, what a crazy way to get a coin, right? I mean, it's a great story. But the real question is does Jesus pay taxes? And the bottom line is though he is of another kingdom. That's why he says the sons are exempt, aren't they? I'm of another kingdom. I should be exempt from this tax. I'm not a part of this earthly system. I'm not paying my taxes. But Jesus says that's not the case. In order to not give them an offense, I want you to go get our taxes, and I want you to pay it for yourself and for me as well. Though he himself was from another kingdom where he would have been tax exempt, so as to not place an impediment, that's what this word means, or a stumbling block in anyone's way, Jesus says, Peter, pay my tax and pay yours as well. Does Jesus pay taxes? Yes, he did. Did he have to? Did he see himself as a citizen of this world, or did he see himself as a citizen elsewhere? Well, when he gets to Pilate, he will say, my kingdom is not of this earth. If my kingdom was of this earth, I would call my soldiers and they would come to my rescue, but I am not of this earth. So though he could have claimed tax exemption, in order to not bring an offense, not to cause problems with the authority that he had placed himself under, he's going to go ahead and pay the tax. The question to Jesus in Luke chapter 20 is not do you, but is it lawful? Do we have to obey the authority, power, and decisions of the Roman Empire, specifically paying taxes to Caesar? Whose authority do we have to obey? Moses or Caesar? That's the question in Luke chapter 20. Well, Jesus masterfully says, it depends. Are you back in Luke chapter 20? It depends on whose kingdom you're operating in, and it depends on whose economy your citizenship is involved in. It depends. Verse 23. Jesus perceived their craftiness, and he said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have?" They said, "Caesar's." He said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he had said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. So there's his answer. It depends. It depends on which kingdom you're operating in which citizenship you're involved with. You see, if you're going to need to determine which kingdom am I involved in. So Jesus says, then what I want you to do is I want you to bring me a coin that represents the economy in question pertaining to your earthly citizenship. So you want to know, do I pay taxes to Caesar? Is it lawful to do so or not? Well, let me have you do this. Show me the inscription that is represented on the economy that is in question. Whose image or symbol of that economy and that citizenship is on that coin? And they say it is Caesar's. And Jesus' conclusion is then that everything that is based upon the image of that economy is to be given to them because it belongs to them. And you're like, wait a second, what do you mean belongs to them? Well, it's found in this word, render. It's used twice. Render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and render to God what belongs to God. He does not say give. There's a Greek word for give. This isn't the Greek word for give. This is the Greek word for render. Well, you say, what's the difference? Give has no indication of ownership. The word give just give. It has no understanding of who it belongs to. The word render has everything to do with who it belongs to. If we were to translate it with the word give, we would say give back, meaning it belonged to them to begin with. You are now involved with it, and you are to give it back to them. You are to render it. Render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Render to God what belongs to God. And so then the question is good grief, what belongs to Caesar? Well, to Rome, that was everything. Everything belonged to Caesar. The fish in the sea belonged to Caesar, and when you pulled them out, he took his share. The grapevines that produced your grape belonged to Caesar, and when you crushed the grapes and you made wine, your profits went to Caesar. Why? Because the grapes belonged to Caesar. Everything belonged to Caesar. You chopped down the wood. You paid a tax on the wood because of the value of the wood. Why would Caesar have anything to do with the value of the wood? Because it was Caesar's. Everything belonged to him. But they were shrewd, and so are many governments. They're shrewd because they can't do it as well. Actually, they'll make no money running your business. The Roman Empire would have gone broke if they had based their economy on fishing. But what they let you do is they let you fish, let you catch, let you build your business, then they tax your fish and the value increase of your business. That's shrewd on their part because Rome wasn't built on fishing. It was built on the taxation and the power of their military. So yeah, as far as when Jesus says render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, everybody knew that everything, at least Caesar thought so. Caesar thought everything belonged to him. But they let you manage it, and they let you run it because you'll do a whole lot better job in growing it and making it more valuable than they would. And they would make a whole lot more collecting taxes on your success than they would running it themselves. So you're supposed to render accordingly. Render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So if Caesar thought that they could do it better and maintain more control, they did do it themselves, and then they charged for it. But for the most part, Caesar let everybody do what they were going to do and then just collected taxes. Governments do that from time to time. They think they can do things better than the people can do it, and so they'll do it in order to maintain control and maintain a sense of charge over it, but then people will have to pay in order to have that benefit. Things like education and healthcare, roads and bridges, all natural resources become part of that entity of government, and they begin to dole it out and to exercise control on it. Retirement, military. You see, if you can control and run these things, then you can stay in power. And Jesus is going to burst their bubble a little bit, and he might burst our bubble a little bit into the understanding that in this world's economy, everything belongs to them. You say, who is them? Well, whoever it is whose image is on the system by which we run our monetary, our economy. They only let us think it belongs to us because we will increase its taxable value. And I know we hate to think about that in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But if you really stop to think about it, what really belongs to you? What really belongs to you is what you get to keep when you stop paying for it or someone else does. So take your land, for example. Stop paying the property taxes and you tell me who owns it. Stop paying and see, what's yours is only what's yours when you stop paying for it or someone else does. Stop paying your car registration. Find out what happens the next time you get pulled over. Whose car will it be? It'll be impounded, and you'll have to pay to get it back. So, well, my business is mine. I've been growing this business. It's all mine. Well, stop paying your income and your payroll tax and see who it belongs to. We like to think it's ours, but there's a wonderful thing in having this bubble burst. I'm gonna maybe help you to think our way through that. It might be a wonderful thing if the bubble is burst that we own anything. Because since, not if, all this belongs to them, then Jesus is saying, give it back to them. And therefore, I can come to the conclusion that I own no material possessions that bear Caesar's image. And that can either be really depressing or it can be liberating because I'm just a manager of what I've been given. I don't own anything. I was bothered by this this week. I was having a hard time thinking through this. I sat on my couch and I thought, something must belong to me. And I looked at all the things in my house. I thought, no, because I bought that and I had to pay a tax on that. So it didn't really, and I bought this house and I got to keep paying them just for the privilege of living in this house. And then I thought, well, all the cool stuff. There are some things that I put in this house that are from nature. I actually went out and got the rocks, quarried the rocks, brought them in, and made them into these things in my house. I didn't pay anybody for that. I thought, yes, those are mine. And then I thought, that just raised the value of this house. You know what I've done? I've just increased its taxable value. I said, well, then forget it. I'll never sell it. They'll never get the taxes for it. And I thought, what will happen when my kids get it? They'll have to pay an inheritance tax. I was kind of depressed sitting on my couch as I thought about everything in my house not belonging to me outright. So I had to pay somebody in the government in order to have every single thing, and if not yet, it won't be long. I kind of got depressed until I started thinking about it a little bit more. Well, if this isn't mine, why am I worried? If it doesn't belong to me, why does things like these possessions make me so upset when I have or don't have? If I'm just a manager, that takes all the pressure's off now. I'm just supposed to be a good manager of what I've been given, and part of that management is to give back when they ask me to give it back, but it doesn't belong to me anyway, so okay, I'll give it back. The second part of his answer addresses an additional citizenship and an additional image. Give Render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but render to God what belongs to God. What Jesus is indicating is that you have an additional citizenship that is in heaven, and there is an additional image upon the economy in which you operate, and the image is on you. It's going to help us to understand that the things of this world are not all that there is, that we actually as believers operate in two different economies, in two different citizenships. And in the temporal citizenship, though I might long for those things and want those things and think somehow those will provide for me, they are passing away. They are devolving, they are eroding, moth and rust are taking them, and yet I'm investing so much into those things as if they were mine. But if I could divulge myself from that and go, these are not mine, these are not going to last, and I'm taking none of them with me because I have a whole different citizenship and a whole different economy that I'm operating in. Because you see, the law was not created in God's image. The temple wasn't created in God's image. Your business isn't created in God's image. You are created in God's image, and he's asking you to render to God what belongs to God. Jesus could have had the whole argument settled. The whole thing would have been done if he just said this: render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. They were done. Argument was over. They couldn't have gone any farther either. But he doesn't. He doesn't stop there. He adds the next phrase. Why? Because he's wanting us to understand that as important as our understanding of our economy and our citizenship in this world, there is a whole nother economy and a whole other citizenship, and Jesus wants us right in relationship with that. He wants us to understand that we bear the image of God upon ourselves. And my thoughts and my mind and my talents and my abilities and my personality and my dispositions and my fears and my anxieties and my worries and my joys all bear the image of God, and I'm to give it all back to him. And if I can operate in that economy as my primary economy and be a steward of all that God has given me, then operating in this other economy becomes a possibility that I'm not tangled up. I'm not tangled up in this economy, and I am in this world, but I am not of it. And how I can be in the world but not of it is to realize that is not me. That's just this world system and all the pleasures and all the niceties and all the securities are there. But they're passing away, and John will tell us this: the world is passing away, and the lusts thereof. But those who do the will of the Father abide forever. And so that we as believers are in this constant struggle of which citizenship am I giving myself to? And every time I give God the citizenship first and the first priority, then everything else takes care of itself. But if I am pursuing the citizenship of this world as if it was my satisfaction, if it was my joy, if it was my all going to fulfill all the longings of my heart, nothing will work right. But if my joy and my satisfaction and my fulfillment and my hope rests in him, then everything else is in its right priority. And that's what Jesus is wanting to address, or he would have just ended the conversation. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and he would have gone on into Capernaum. But he doesn't. He wants his followers to understand that it is more important to be involved in this other economy, in this other citizenship, and for us to have a clear lens on that relationship that we have with him. Jesus could have also said, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, render to God what belongs to God, and render to yourself what belongs to you. But he doesn't add that last phrase. Because when we can live as servant managers and not owners, we'll be set free to see this citizenship of this world, the governments that control it, completely different. We will see them as Jesus did, that we'll get a glimpse in next week in John chapter 19, and it will set us free. I'll be free from all of this. I can live in a dual citizenship, free from the burdens and the anxieties and the worries that this citizenship is actually trying to create in me. I don't know if you've witnessed it, but it's almost like this citizenship wants me anxious. It wants me worried. It wants me in turmoil, because then I'll look to it for answers. God doesn't want us in turmoil. He wants us to enjoy the peace that he offers us and the satisfaction that only he can bring into our life, and that sets us free. When we realize that we are but stewards of all that bears God's image, and there is nothing that I can call mine, this allows Christians to live above the tyranny of government. As we live in the world, we live in it, but we are not of it, making the most of everything because that's what brings God glory. Nothing is mine. And that shouldn't bring us anxiety. That should make us go, thank God. I am not bound to the things of this world. These are not mine. This is not my home. And it's really going to be all wrapped up in this word mine. Because really with the word mine, selfishness and covetousness become the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is covetousness and selfishness. If nothing is mine, selfishness and covetousness are gone. I really want to get into another topic, but my time is running short. I think I have this in my slides. Although I know mine is one of the first words spoken in every language, I mean, you come with me to somebody who's got a 2-year-old, and I'll give you that they've got a handful of words they operate with. But one of their most enduring words, and one that is used all the time, is mine. It's mine. Before they can say daddy or mommy or thank you, mine is like one of those first engraven images in our hearts. Is it not? This idea that somehow this belongs to me. It's really, like a 2-year-old knows the reality that possession is 9/10 of the law, don't they? You haven't even cut your first tooth and you know possession is 9/10 of the law. It's mine. I don't know if you've thought about this, but I've given this a lot of thought, and I'm looking forward to getting around to this, because in the weeks to come, we're going to look at government systems. And I'm going to make a case, and I think I can, that there are government systems that are based around covetousness and selfishness and the mine syndrome. And there are governments that are not. And there will be governments that are based on trying to deny our selfishness and our covetousness. There's actually systems being set up to exploit the mine syndrome that all human beings have. It does create odds with the government, because if the government thinks it's all theirs and we think it's all ours, there's going to be a conflict in the middle. We're going to get to that in the next couple of weeks. When we live as servant managers and not owners of all our material possessions, we will be set free to see this citizenship and the governments that control it completely different. We will see them as Jesus did, and it will set us free. And when we can live as the servants of the Lord, stewards of all that he has given us that bears his image, we'll be set free to serve him and to live for him like never before. And that's my hope. I don't know if it's yours, but I want to live in this. I don't know if it's just me. I feel in the citizenship of the world and the citizenship of heaven, there is an angst about that. Constant temptation, constant pulling here and there. Like this earth and this stuff, this existence is so important. And then, no, this existence is so important. I'm in this, back and forth of these existences. And I don't know about you, I want to be set free from that. Because I don't think that's God's intention, that I am an ambassador in this world and I'm in constant angst. I'm an ambassador in this world, and I am here to serve him and to use the resources that I have at my disposal in a way that's pleasing to him. That's where I'd like to be. And so I need to understand how this is all kind of set up, somewhat working against me, because it appeals to my selfishness and to my covetousness. And I have to let that go in order to not have the angst of that covetousness and selfishness involved in everything I do and every motivation and every priority of my life. So how do I break free from that? I believe that's what Jesus is trying to help us to see. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. And there's nothing in that statement that has to do with you. This is all God's. It's all Caesar's, and you operate in the middle of it as just a servant of theirs. Pleasing God and even pleasing them because you know that their master, who is God, is going to hold them ultimately accountable. And we'll get to that as Paul develops those thoughts in Romans chapter 13. What we're going to look at tomorrow. Yeah, come back tomorrow. What we're going to look, this is a week-long series, every day this week. What we're going to look at next Sunday is now Jesus has to actually put these words into practice, because this isn't going to be theoretical. When he is standing before Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Rome, who has the power of life and death in his hands, how will Jesus respond? I mean, it's nice to, right? We could talk about this here on Sunday morning. We're here on these nice cushions. We're all here on this beautiful Sunday. This is nice. Oh, look, he read this passage. This is really nice. But you get face-to-face with the IRS. Get face-to-face with the government. Get face-to-face with the government. You don't like its direction. You don't like its plans. You don't like its policies. And they're not just theoretical. They're affecting your daily life. Then what do you do? Because Jesus will now be in the face of Pontius Pilate, and he will give us some great lessons as to just how far-reaching does God let government get. Come back and join us next Sunday when we look in John chapter 19. Father, we thank you for your word. We do struggle, Lord, to be citizens of this world and citizens of heaven. And we know you've maybe you've put us in this anxious position so that we just have to trust you more. And Lord, if that's what it takes for us to trust you, then I'm okay being in angst. If I have to be in angst to rely upon you, to see you at work in my heart, then whatever angst that might involve, I'm okay with that. But Lord, I just pray you would give us the ability to rise above the angst and the worry and the trouble of the world we live in, and to live people that are enjoying your peace and enjoying your joy, enjoying your satisfaction, and enjoying the hope that you bring into our lives. Lord, it is that we ask and we pray for. And Lord, however we need to take your word and apply it to our lives so that we can enjoy those things, Lord, give us guidance and direction. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Why don't you stand with me and let's